Hello, and welcome back to another Pirkei Avot text explication with your host, Rabbi Drew. We are now on the 11th text in the 4th chapter, and like a few other of the texts that we have seen in this 4th chapter, we have two rabbis speaking in this. The first of these rabbis is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer, son of Jacob, and the second one is Rabbi Yochanan Hassanlar, Rabbi Yochanan the sandal maker. So the first of these is by Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer, son of Jacob, who has, whether you want to consider it a two-part or a three-part statement, here's what he says. Ha'osa mitzvah achat kona lo praklit echad. One who does even one mitzvah, one commandment, acquires for themselves an advocate. Ha'over avera achat kona lo kategor echad. And that one who commits one transgression acquires from oneself an accuser. One thing that stands out, I don't know how familiar you are with Hebrew, but there are a couple words here that are actually not originally Hebrew. And those words are praklit and kategor, which are loan words from the Greek of accuser and defender or advocate. And here, these are pretty parallel statements sayings of basically when you do something, a good thing will happen, and or a good thing being a mitzvah of actually accomplishing a commandment, and then when you do the exact opposite of transgressing against something in the Torah, doing the opposite of a mitzvah, then you have some sort of an accuser against you. Now, where exactly? Well, one thing I want to point out is we have seen earlier in this chapter about when you do mitzvot, when you do commandments, when you're executing commandments that are in the Torah, and when you're doing transgressing them, that good things and bad things happen, and it corresponds to your actions. Here, very much fits in line with that, although it's receiving a different articulation of that by Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov here. Interestingly, he puts out there that you acquire either a defender or an accuser. Now he's taking this language from court cases, adjudication. Where is this adjudication meant to take place? It's unclear just from what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov states here. Is this something that takes place during one's own lifetime, or is it after one passes away and then deciding what happens afterwards? And even if it is during one's lifetime, are there different moments? Are there different times at which these things are being decided, one's merits are being debated? It's unclear exactly where and when these would take place, these advocates versus the defenders. Okay, that's the first part of this. And then he finishes off by saying, Teshuva u'ma'asim tovim kitarim bifnei hapuranu. That repentance and good deeds, literally ma'asim tovim, good deeds, are, shields. Kitris, I misspoke. It's not kitarim, it's kitris bifnei hapuranus, are a shield against punishment. That, it's interesting. So, that these are sort of helpers, as it were, working within the framework he just set up of having defenders when doing mitzvot, that having the teshuva and ma'asim tovim. Ma'asim tovim are good deeds, not really to the level of formal mitzvot, formal execution of commandments, but something akin to that, or somehow otherwise helpful, as he says here, they act as a shield. And also teshuva. Now teshuva, repentance, one only repents when one has done some misdeed, they've done wrong, and whether that's interpersonally or even between a person and God. So that they won't necessarily get you, it's not necessarily, to use a different language, offensive as far as getting you in a better place, but it certainly help you defensively. That's why he uses the language and imagery of a shield. That's interesting perspectives from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now we get to the second part, the second saying here in this text, and this is by, I mentioned earlier, Rabbi Yochanan Hassanlar, Rabbi Yochanan the sandal maker. And here's what he says, and this is a two-part statement. He says, Kol knesia shehi l'shem shemaim sofa lit kayim. Every assembly which is for the sake of heaven will endure in the end. And then the second part of it is v'she'ena l'shem shemaim ein sofa lit kayim. So every assembly which is not for the sake of heaven will not ultimately endure. Now, this is pretty much the same. He just says one thing and says the inverse. But at least he's consistent. That in his mind, that when people gather, if they are really only, I don't know what the non-Shem Shemayim would be. Maybe, who knows, maybe you're, it's easy to think of something that is against the name of heaven, but one could do it even for just simply normal stuff, like a bunch of merchants getting together. Who knows? Maybe they're a bunch of farmers getting together. Okay, so farmers, that's not going to endure forever and ever. Okay, it'll last as long as the farmers need that gathering or need, whatever they need the purposes of that assembly for. Okay, it'll be nice. But what he's advocating here is when people come together for, literally it's Shem Shemaim, so the name of heaven, but it's really more of, it's not literally name, it's more of sort of like God's reputation, as it were, sort of advocating for God and that sort of thing. So something that's definitely very God positive, as it were, and somehow that will endure. So I think what he may have in mind are, for instance, Batei Din, courts, Jewish courts of law. That could be one. Sanhedrin, which is sort of like a grand based din, a great Jewish court of law. So I think that may be fitting in more of what he's thinking about as far as those. So this has been text 11 in chapter 4. So again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov saying, when you do mitzvot, you get a defender or an advocate, and when you do a transgression, you get an accuser. Where that will be battled out is unclear from his statement. And then teshuva ma'asim tovim ketris bifnei hapurianos, that against punishment, at least doing repentance and good deeds will help shield you. And then, of course, we have at the end Rabbi Yochanan, the sandal maker, saying, if you have a gathering, assembly for the sake of heaven, it'll endure, and if not, it won't. So that's what we have here in text 11 in chapter 4, and thank you so much for watching.